Okay, so there's some pretty big breaking news. Here is this tweet today that I want to show you. Breaking: President Biden used a pseudonym, Robert L. Peters, when emailing his son's business associates, including using it to schedule secret calls with the president of Ukraine. The use of the name prevented discovery of the messages under FOIA, that's the Freedom of Information Act. Representative James Comer is demanding NARA, which is the National Archives. It's the NRA is the National Archives and Records Administration. So he is demanding NARA or whatever provide records pertaining Biden's fake email address, Robert L. Peters. So let's go ahead and look over what the House Oversight Committee has come out with. This is a bombshell. If this is true, this is really, really damning. Biden using a pseudonym while conducting business. No wonder we never saw Biden's name in any of the Hunter Biden business dealings. And that was what Democrats said. Well, there's nothing there. So what? Hunter Biden, conducted business and his dad was vice president. So what? His dad wasn't involved. There was nothing that his dad was doing. So what if he talked on the phone and said hi? So what if he had some coffee? So what if if he was helping his son siphon millions of dollars into family bank accounts? So what? Seems like Democrats are saying. But look, if he was doing it under a pseudonym, this is the smoking gun. I mean, ultimately, it's a smoking gun. If they can find that he was actually conducting business deals, especially under a pseudonym, that means he was trying to hide it. He knew that it was bad, knew that it was wrong. And this would be a death nail, I think, in Biden's political coffin. Here is the press release that was released today by the House Oversight Committee. It says House Committee on Oversight and Accountability Chairman James Comer today is calling on the National Archives and Records Administration, NARA, to provide then Vice President Joe Biden's records regarding his duties as vice president that overlapped with his son's activities in Ukraine. Chairman Comer is requesting all unredacted documents and communications in which then Vice President Joe Biden used a pseudonym, Hunter Biden, Eric Sherwin, or Devin Archer, is copied, and all drafts of then Vice President Biden's speech delivered to the Ukrainian Rada in December of 2015. And it says, quote, this is from Chairman Comer. He says, Joe Biden has stated there was an absolute wall between his family's foreign business schemes and his duties as vice president, but evidence reveals that access was wide open for his family's influence peddling. We already have evidence of then Vice President Biden speaking, dining, and having coffee with his son's foreign business associates. We also know that Hunter Biden and his associates were informed of then Vice President Biden's official government duties in countries where they had financial interests. The National Archives must provide these unredacted records to further our investigation into the Biden family corruption. In the actual this is the letter that they sent to the National Archives and Records Administration. They wrote, the Committee on Oversight and Accountability is investigating President Biden's meetings and communications with certain family members and their business associates during his tenure as vice president. It goes on to say, attached to this email and made available on the NARA website is a document that indicates at 9 a.m. on May 27, 2016, Vice President Biden took a call with the president of Ukraine, Petro Poroshenko. It is concerning to the committee, however, that this document was sent to Robert L. Peters, a pseudonym the committee has identified as then Vice President Biden. Additionally, the committee questions why the then vice president's son, Hunter Biden, and only Hunter Biden, was copied on this email to then Vice President Biden. Yeah, that is a really, really good question. And I think that is what everybody wants to know about this is, if it turns out that he was using these pseudonyms and that's how he was trying to communicate with these people and conducting family business, that is actually very, very damning. Now, what's really interesting about all of this, though, is, it's hard to believe that with all of this coming out, it's hard to believe Democrats are going to want Joe Biden as their nominee. I think that we already know that they don't want him because of his mental decline and his age. But then when you add in all of the details of what's looking increasingly like corruption, there is no way he wins, and they know it. They already know that he is they're battling an uphill deal with him as it is. I mean, even without all this corruption, even without the Hunter Biden laptop, people are already not so sure about Joe Biden and his ability to run the government. In fact, many people believe he's not, and that there's somebody else running the government. And, but we don't know who that is. It's an unelected, shadowy person behind the president who's actually the puppet master. And that's very frightening to many of us. We like to know who actually has control of the nukes, right? Who's actually in charge of the American war machine, which has gone haywire and out of control under Joe Biden. So he's already not popular. Then you add in all of this Hunter Biden stuff, the laptop, the fact that it ended up being real and not a Russian hoax. And now we're starting to see more and more information about millions of dollars being paid out to his family members, and his family members being completely unqualified. Then we see that he's meeting with these business associates because Hunter Biden's clearly peddling access to his father. And then the Democrats say, well, but it's not really... Hunter Biden could peddle the illusion of access to his father, but as long as it was just the illusion and not the reality, there's nothing there. There's no there. Well, it turns out maybe there is. If he was operating with the pseudonym and contacting the president of Ukraine, for example, and only CCing his son under a name not Vice President Joe Biden, yeah, things are not looking so good. So the fact that all of this is coming out, Democrats, liberal media, they're not really covering it, but they're also not really defending it, right? So they're kind of ignoring it, and they're just sort of letting things come out as they come out, and they're not swinging. They're not going up to bat for Biden. They're really not. They're ignoring this. I mean, if they were really truly wanting to defend him, they would come out, they would look at all of this stuff, and they would say, oh, there's nothing, this is what it is, and it's really truly nothing, and they would fiercely defend the guy. But they're not. So my suspicion is they are absolutely looking to get rid of him. And I think they also want to get rid of Kamala Harris while they're at it because no one likes her either. And here's how I think they're going to do it. I do think they're actually going to be getting rid of Joe Biden. I don't think he's going to be the nominee in 2024. But I also don't think they want to have an election. I certainly don't think they want to risk someone like RFK Jr. winning. So I think the way they're going to do it is they're going to act like Biden is the guy all the way up through the primaries. When the primaries are over, they're still going to say Biden's the guy, that he defeated handedly RFK Jr. and Marianne Williamson, and that Joe Biden is obviously the nominee. And then right before the convention, I think they're going to be moving him aside. And they're going to be actually, in my guess, if I were a betting woman, I would say that they're going to be putting in Gavin Newsom is how they're going to do it. And the way they're going to do this, look, they don't want to have an election. They're not interested in an election, a primary. They just want to put in who they want to put in because they don't want to risk somebody, like I mentioned, RFK Jr., winning that nomination. They don't want to have an actual battle of Democrats. They don't want to have debates with RFK Jr. and Gavin Newsom or whoever else might be Cory Booker or whoever, Kamala, maybe she's, I still want to try, or whoever else they think might be trying to run for president, Pete Buttigieg, whoever it might be. They don't want to actually have those debates. They don't want to actually have a primary. They just want to put in the person they want to put in. And we saw that even with Joe Biden himself getting the nomination the last time around. And we saw when they chose Kamala Harris, they tried to shove her down our throats. They were saying, this is the next president of the United States. We're finally going to have a woman. She's going to be a woman of color, and you're going to like it. And so they were trying to parlay her into the presidency through the vice presidency, but it didn't work because nobody liked Kamala Harris. And when she got into that role, people liked her even less. And less and less. And they saw that she has no leadership skills whatsoever when it comes to leading a country. And her approval ratings have just absolutely tanked. She's less likable than even Joe Biden, if that's even possible. So they need to get rid of both of them. They're not going to be able to just move Biden aside. They're not going to be able to, they're in a pickle because they can't replace Kamala Harris as his running mate. Who would they replace her with? And that looks terrible. To replace after they tout it, they're propping up. We've got the woman of color. There's no way they could replace her. They'd have to find another woman of color, and even then, it would be It'd be very awkward. I mean, maybe they tossed around in their minds, maybe, Stacey Abrams, maybe in their minds, but again, not a national figure that people identify with or gravitate to. They've tried. So how are they going to get out of this dilemma that they're in? How are they going to get Joe Biden to move aside, get Kamala Harris to move aside, and get somebody else in? And their only strategy is to not hold a primary, but instead go straight to the convention, have Joe Biden suddenly, he says, okay, there's just too much going on with my family. I need to worry about my son and my family and my life. And so I am not going to run for another term. I'm sorry. You all expected me to. I know. Thank you. Love you. But I'm not going to be seeking a second term. Now, he's not going to step down because then that would mean Kamala Harris steps in, right? And they don't want that. So they're going to want him to ride out his term all the way to the end. But what they're going to want to do come that July convention is they're going to want him, after they give them the anointed one, their next anointed one, they're going to want him to campaign alongside that person, shaking hands, waving, saying, this is, I'm just getting too old. I said I would only do one term. Now I'm really thinking about that and realizing it. So I'm going to keep my promise. And here's the new person. Here's Gavin Newsom. And I want everybody to vote for Gavin Newsom. And he's the guy. He's the one we want. He's the one we love because he's super ultra establishment. And he's clearly the one that they have picked to succeed Joe Biden. And it's their way of getting rid of Kamala Harris. Why? Because you can't have two of them from California, right? So it's going to be awkward. And Gavin Newsom's going to say, well, I'm from California, and so I need to get somebody from the East Coast. It's going to be a big chatter on CNN. You can see it now. Oh, well, they can't go with Kamala Harris. They can't have two people from California. They do need to have representation if they're going to be fair to the East Coast or Midwest representation. And so they're going to need to find a different person to be Gavin Newsom's running mate. And Kamala Harris will say, for the good of the country, I agree that, we really need representation. That's what America's about. And so both of us being from the West Coast and California, it just doesn't make sense. So I'm happy to move on with my life. And this was fun and this was great, but I'm moving on. So she'll get to bow out gracefully somewhat. Joe Biden will get to bow out gracefully. They'll be able to bring Gavin Newsom in without a vote. And this is where it gets important. How can they do that? Well, they don't need to have a vote. All they have to do is show up at the convention and they could say the delegates are voting. And these are, they'll have this kind of pretend thing. So they'll be able to sidestep all the state's primaries. And they'll have the convention. And at the convention, they'll say, oh, gee, Joe Biden's stepping aside. Now it's a scramble and the primaries are over, so we can't have the people vote. So we, the DNC, have come up with a few candidate options, and we're going to let the delegates vote on those few candidate options. And they're going to play around with it and make it seem like it's a real, true Democratic vote, even though the people aren't voting at all. It's just the delegates. And they're going to ensure that, I'm telling you, I think it's Gavin Newsom. That is who they're going to put into that position. I could be somebody else, I suppose. I don't know how in love with him they really are. I think they just want somebody establishment-y, but he's the only one that I can think of because there's already indications, like here, this Politico article, there's already indications that this is their golden boy. This is the race they really wanted. Both sides, both establishment sides, left and right, really wanted to see Newsom and DeSantis going up against each other in 2024. That's who they thought would be the candidates in 2024, that Trump would definitely not be the guy. They've definitely done everything they can to try to get him thrown in jail. So they're hoping he's rotting in jail or so tied up with legal that he's not running for president, or that the American people have turned on him because he's got too many indictments. That's not the case. He's winning, and he's just shooting up in the polls. So that idea is not going anywhere. But this is what they were thinking, the establishment, which the establishment's stupid. They don't understand the American people anymore, which is why they, for one, gave us Kamala Harris as the vice president, right? And they thought, oh, yeah, but Pete Buttigieg is the next one they're really going to love. So they gave him a cabinet position, and because they really don't understand the American people. And then they give us Ron DeSantis. They groomed him, made him seem like a real populist. He did really well in the beginning. People loved him. I liked him a lot when he was governing Florida during the pandemic. And then he changed and he started really touting some real serious establishment opinions. He can't give us a straight answer when it comes to wars. He's super in bed with AIPAC lobby. I mean, it's just a very establishment-y vibe coming off of Ron DeSantis lately. But this is who they wanted. They wanted Ron. And this is, you've got Rupert Murdoch. He's all in for Ron DeSantis. Fox News is all in for Ron DeSantis. But they're now realizing they can't be because he's like the Kamala Harris, where they thought this would be the person that our base will cling on to for all the reasons we think our base likes people, only for them to not really understand their base. So they're all in on Ron DeSantis, but that's not working. And Democrats, they clearly are thinking Gavin Newsom is the next one because they're trying to get these two to debate each other. Why would they be doing a presidential debate on Fox News? Gavin Newsom and Ron DeSantis, neither of them. I mean, Ron DeSantis is not going to be the Republican nominee. As much as they're trying to get rid of Trump, he's just not going to be. It's going to be Trump again. And Gavin Newsom, unless they do exactly what I'm saying, going to parlay him in without a vote, I mean, at this point, it's Joe Biden, right? I mean, that's what we're thinking. It's Joe Biden and Donald Trump. That's who's really going to be in the 2024 election. But this is their dream. This is who they're thinking about. So the Democrats, it's a lot easier for them to get there because, like I said, all they have to do is have Joe Biden step aside right before the convention. And then at the convention, they hold a vote with just the delegates. That's how they'll do it. Now, I want to turn your attention to the 1968 Democratic Convention because what I'm saying is not new and novel. What I'm saying has been done before, and they're just going to recreate the 1968 Democratic Party presidential primaries where they didn't really have much of a primary. I mean, it's almost identical to, actually even to a scary level. This is the primary that Robert F. Kennedy Sr. ran in this primary, and then he was assassinated. He was doing very well. Him and Eugene McCarthy were from Minnesota. They were both doing really well in the various primary elections that had been held at that point until Robert F. Kennedy was assassinated, in which case Eugene McCarthy got the majority vote. He won the popular vote with the Democratic primaries at that point. He won 38.7% of the vote. Robert F. Kennedy, of course, he died too early in order to know how well he would have done had he continued in those primary races, but he still ended up with 30.6% of the popular vote. But neither of those two got the nomination. Neither of them ended up being the Democratic Party candidate because ultimately it came down to the convention. The convention got together and they said, well, we don't like these anti-establishment guys. I mean, they clearly assassinated Kennedy. And with McCarthy, they thought, no, I don't care if you got the popular vote. I don't care if people like you. We don't. We're the establishment. And it's the delegates that matter at the convention. And so we're just going to make sure they vote for someone else. And they did. They voted for Hubert Humphrey. He got 2.2% of the popular vote because he didn't even run in a single primary. He didn't have to run in a single primary because you don't have to in order to be the nominee for the Democratic Party. He didn't run in any. What he did was he went around instead and he just lobbied the delegates. He went around lobbying the establishment and he said, I should be president. I should be the nominee. He was at that time vice president of the United States. It was Lyndon B. Johnson who was president. Lyndon B. Johnson was not going to be seeking a second term. He decided to step aside. The Vietnam War was not popular. And so he wasn't, he started being primaried by McCarthy and Kennedy. They were doing really well against Johnson. And so Johnson thought, this is I'm going to be a one-term president. I'm going to lose the primary. So that's really embarrassing. So he bowed out. His vice president jumped into the race, but didn't really jump into the race. Didn't win any of the primaries, didn't run, didn't care to run. He just thought, as long as I get the establishment's vote, I don't need the people. And after Kennedy was killed, McCarthy got the popular vote, but nobody cared. Humphrey ended up with the nomination. That is what they're going to do this next time, 1 year from now. I'm saying it now, 1 year from now, this is how it's going to go down. Now, scary, right? Now we've got Robert F. Kennedy Jr. running in this election. That's the guy that I believe would get a lot of the popular vote if Joe Biden were to step aside the same way Lyndon Johnson did when he realized nobody really likes me. Really, I got to move to the side. If Joe Biden were to step aside and you've got Robert F. Kennedy Jr., then maybe you've got Kamala Harris jumps in the race the same way Hubert Humphrey jumped in, the vice president jumps in, says, okay, I'll run. Then you're going to have somebody like Gavin Newsom jumping in. You're going to get a bunch of Democrats jumping in. But Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has a really good chance of getting a ton of the votes. And they know this because Kennedys often do. And so he could potentially run away with an actual primary if there was an actual primary. If they were being fair, he could potentially actually win. Now, I don't think they're going to assassinate him, but they're clearly doing a character assassination on him. So they're doing the same thing to him that they did to his dad. They're just doing it in the new way that they can. Information spreads fast. There's the internet. And so all they have to do is a character assassination, and that's what they're attempting. They don't really want to risk it. So they're going to they're not going to let him win. They're not even going to let him really run. I mean, he's running kind of, but they're not really going to let him have a fair primary against other contenders. Instead, they're going to do the Hubert Humphrey, where they're just going to say, all we need is the delegates to vote for the person that we want, the establishment person that we want, and that'll be that. And they've learned. Now, the 1968 Democrat Convention was a nightmare. There was the riots in Chicago, and it was because you got a lot of people out there. They were not happy with the Vietnam War. They were protesting the Vietnam War. And you've got Eugene McCarthy, who was very against the war. He was the one that was winning the popular vote. And then you got Hubert Humphrey, who was establishment right-wing Democrat. He was pro-war and, tried to pretend, realizing it wasn't popular to be pro-war. So he kind of used some language to make it sound like he wasn't, he's like, well, we can, the policies of yesterday don't have to be the policies of today don't have to be the policies of tomorrow. He kind of used language to make it sound like maybe he would be taking a different stance on the war, but everybody knew he wasn't going to. And riots broke out because the Democratic Party showed that they were not being democratic in how they were bringing forward a nominee. They brought the nominee forward that was pro-war, who they wanted. They didn't want the anti-war Eugene McCarthy, and people were pissed. People were really, really pissed. They've learned from that. That was a disaster, so they won't quite do it that same way this next time around. That's why they won't even hold primaries. They want to avoid that situation. They don't want the RFK Jr. to actually be the popular choice because he's more anti-war and anti-establishment. They instead will avoid that scenario altogether. They'll have Joe Biden all the way up to the convention. And then when the primaries are over and Joe Biden is their clear winner and their clear nominee, Joe Biden will suddenly not be available for whatever reason, and they'll have to choose amongst their own establishment people. Now, they might put they'll say, okay, delegates, here's the candidate choice. Of course, here's RFK Jr. and here's Marianne Williamson over here. But here's our Gavin Newsom, here's our Kamala Harris, here's our Amy Klobuchar, here's our Cory Booker, here's our Pete Buttigieg. You guys choose. And so it'll look like there was some sort of democratic process that happened, but they're not really, because the people had no say. And the delegates will vote, and I'm telling you, it's going to be probably Gavin Newsom. That's who they would end up with. And then that way they could get rid of Kamala Harris, so they kind of have to have it be Gavin Newsom. So they could get rid of Kamala because they can't have two hailing from California. And then he could pick his own running mate, and it would be somebody entirely different. That's what I'm predicting. I think that's what's really going to happen. I think that's how it's going to go down. But I'd love to hear from you. What do you think is going to happen? How are they going to get rid of Joe Biden? They got to do it creatively, but they got to make sure that RFK Jr. doesn't end up with it. How are they going to do that? Email me, kim@kimiversen.com. I would love to hear from you what you think. All right, guys, I want to tell you about forpatriots.com. This is a company that's dedicated to helping Americans prepare for whatever comes their way, whether it's a natural disaster or another pandemic, or even just supplies to get you through summer and winter. 4Patriots has the products you need. They offer a wide range of survival gear like thermal blankets, generators, water filtration kits. They also have many choices of survival food kits that range in size from 72-hour kits all the way to a year's supply of food. I definitely think you should always have a stockpile of food to get you through at least 72 hours. But I would say go for a few weeks because remember the pandemic and then we couldn't get anything from the grocery stores. So stock up. Don't be unprepared again. We never know what's going to happen. Check it out, forpatriots.com. Use the promo code Kim at checkout for 10% off your order.